Hi, this is Maggie. In this video we're going to continue designing our auction program. In the last video we identified some object candidates and the structural relationships between them. In the last video we identified account, auctioneer, listing, and bid object candidates. The account object has a composition association with listing objects and bid objects, and it has a unidirectional navigational association with the auctioneer. The account maintains information about the user account. The listing maintains information about the listing, including a reference to the current high bid, and the bid maintains information about a bid, including a reference to the listing that it is a bid on. This static organization shows us object associations, which is how objects can send each other messages. Will this static organization work to fulfill our make bid use case? What we should do is determine the series of messages that the objects will send each other to fulfill this use case. A sequence diagram can help us map out the messages that are sent to accomplish work in an object-oriented system and can then document how work is accomplished. A sequence diagram is a dynamic snapshot of the system executing, and a sequence diagram will map to a single use case. Because it can be difficult to follow the flow of control in an object-oriented system, a sequence diagram can help us understand how a particular use case is fulfilled within a system. So I will sketch out a sequence diagram, and as I do this, make some decisions about how this use case will be fulfilled. We'll see if what we come up with for the static structure will work, or if it will have to be amended. I will begin by drawing each of the objects that will be collaborating to fulfill this use case in rectangles along the top of the sequence diagram. Generally, we draw them left to right according to their importance in the use case. The use case starts with the account viewing a listing, so I'll put the account and the listing first and second. These are objects at the top of the sequence diagram, not classes, so I am writing an object name. Let's then put the auctioneer. And again, I think there will be only one auctioneer object per system. And finally, we'll put bid. Now, under each object, in a straight dashed line down the page, we have a lifeline. This diagram is read top to bottom, and that is time. So the use case fulfillment begins at the top, and we read the diagram down, showing the time order of the messages being sent. What we are going to show is the messages that objects send to each other to fulfill the use case. So beginning with the account viewing the listing, I'll call that message view. I draw that as an arrow from account to listing, labeled with the name of the message. The listing will send back its information to the account, so it will return some kind of view of itself, perhaps a string. So I show that as a dotted line, returning back to the calling object's lifeline, and for now I will label that view. To be more clear, let's call the message getView. Data being returned is shown as a dashed arrow again. And on the listing lifeline, I put a rectangle showing when the current listing object has control, while it was responding to the message, or while its method was executing. So this is a message send. The account object sends a getView message to this listing, and the listing getView method executes, which results in sending back some information that I am calling view. While the method is executing, the listing object has control, shown by this rectangle called an activation box. The account then chooses to bid on the listing. So again, the account initiates a message. Where is this message going? Well, I've given the account class a reference to the auctioneer, so let's have the account send a bid message to the auctioneer, and it will need to pass along the listing that it's bidding on and the amount of the bid. So those are parameters. And the reference to the listing allows the auctioneer to talk to the listing or send it a message, and the amount of the bid is to create a bid object. Remember that a listing may or may not have a current high bid. We can show alternate paths and loops in a sequence diagram, but let's keep this one simple for now and show only the main use case. So we will assume there is a current high bid, and we'll have the auctioneer send a get current high bid message to the listing, and the listing will return a reference to a bid object. Okay, so this is interesting because it means there might be two bid objects in our use case fulfillment. The current high bid and the new bid. I'm going to create a new lifeline for the current high bid. Now, the auctioneer can ask the current high bid what its value is. And the current high bid will return its value. Once again, we've reached a decision. The auctioneer is responsible for ensuring that this bid is higher than the current high bid. There's something we haven't considered yet too, and that is that the owner of the listing really needs to be different from the bidder. Otherwise, we're allowing somebody to bid on their own auction, which could allow them to artificially inflate the price. So we'll set that idea aside, because here I just want to illustrate how to draw a sequence diagram and how it helps us understand and even plan how a use case is fulfilled, and helps us design our classes. So we will assume that the account bidding is not the account with the listing, but in the future we'll have to check that. So assuming that this bid is higher for now, and let me rename those two values so they're a little clearer. So assuming this bid is higher for now and that the bidder is valid, the auctioneer will create the bid, sending it its value and its reference to the listing. Now, sometimes in sequence diagrams, the object's lifeline begins at the top, and sometimes it begins where the object is created. So we could move the rectangle down to this point where we're creating the object. I'm going to have the object names at the top, but please know that some sequence diagrams will be drawn the other way, showing when an object comes into existence by starting the lifeline at that point. Now that we have the bid object, we will send a reference to it to the listing, and we will send a reference to it to the account making the bid. Okay, before we put a conditional within this sequence diagram, let's talk about how this sequence diagram helps us understand our classes. We've now listed a number of methods that belong to these classes. For example, we have the getCurrentHighBid method of the listing class. We can see the parameters. When we write these methods, we can see the messages that need to be sent in these methods. For example, when the auctioneer receives the bid message, we know that in response it gets the current high bid. It then asks that object for its value. It does a comparison that we haven't shown in the diagram yet. It creates a bid object and it sends that bid object to the account and to the listing. I will enhance our class diagrams to include these new messages. There. Now, they're not complete, of course, but what we do is, as we design the fulfillment of each use case, we start accumulating methods and message sends in our class diagrams, and perhaps pseudocode for our methods, and we get a much clearer picture of what each class must be. When we are finished, our classes are complete, and we can again evaluate them. Are they coherent? Do they have coherent responsibilities? Are they as independent as possible from the rest of the system? Do we need to add, remove, combine, or change classes? Are there associations that we missed? Okay, so now let's look at how we put a condition inside a sequence diagram. We have the condition in which there is no current high bid. So we will open up some space in our diagram for the branch. If there is no current high bid, we'll get the minimum starting bid from the listing. We'll draw a box. And label it Alt. Under the label, we write the condition. So I'll write bid equals none. And within the box, we show the messages that are sent in this alternate path. Now, we still have to complete the other alternate path, which is whether the bid, either the current high bid's value or the minimum starting bid, is lower than, or in the case of minimum starting bid, lower than or equal to the bid that came from account. I will leave drawing that to you as an exercise. If this diagram seems too complex, you could separate it into 2 diagrams, but try to draw it in one. You might also take the use case make listing and follow this process for that use case for practice. It's messy, but if you accept that your decisions are fluid and remain open to change, then it will be less difficult. Sketch your design out by hand so you're not too invested. Drawing in software can be time-consuming. If you're sketching by hand, it's easy to make changes until you have a system that works. Have fun with it.